Hello, my name is Álvaro Montoro and I'm going to show how to create a video game like Rock Band or Guitar Hero using web technologies. It's going to be a small game. I'm going to develop it in like 30-40 minutes and it's only going to use standard HTML and CSS and vanilla JavaScript, like no libraries, no plugins, just the Gamepad API that is one of the standard web APIs that are available in JavaScript. So let's start by making this a little bit bigger so it can be seen in the video. And let's focus on the JavaScript for now. Let's make this big. We don't care about what we're generating. So the Gamepad API has two events. Both of them are attached to a window. And those events are Gamepad connected, that is triggered when a Gamepad is connected to the browser. So I'm going to just, for now, I just put a message like, hey, Gamepad was connected. And then, oh, you see. And then the same way, there's another event that is Gamepad disconnected, that is triggered when the Gamepad is disconnected. So as you can see on the video, now I connected a game controller and there's no message on the console, and that's because sometimes the browser needs a small push to detect the game controller, so we need to push a button, and you see when we press the button we get the message Gamepad was connected. If I disconnect right now the Gamepad, I get the message Gamepad was disconnected, and again connected. Normally, once the browser has detected the Gamepad, you don't need to press a button anymore for it to continue detecting it. Okay, so now we have this where the browser is detecting our Gamepad, and what we're going to do is that we're going to keep track of all the Gamepads that are connected to the browser, and I'm going to save that in a second so we don't get these messages. Save as private, and actually settings, let me make it public so it's available later, and I will link it in the video. So what we want to do is keep track of all the Gamepads that are connected to the browser. We want that because later, as we develop, we will see that we need to read the Gamepads and we get a list of all the Gamepads. And we only want to use the ones that we're actually handling as part of our application and the ones that are connected to our browser, like connected. So what we're going to do is that we are going to save the unique identifier of that Gamepad in the object Gamepads. So we can say Gamepads of e.gamepad.index equals true, for example. It's not important, the value. And then when we disconnect it, we remove that Gamepad by deleting it from the object. So Gamepads e.gamepad.index. If you're curious to know what is inside the Gamepad, we can do a console log Gamepad, and let's show the console, clear this. So now when I connect the Gamepad and I press a button, you can see that the Gamepad is an object that has information about the axis, that would be the joystick, the buttons, that provides information if the button is pressed, or if it's touched, that means that the finger is on top of the button but is not pressed. And not all game controllers have that. And then a value given by the browser. Then there's more information like if it's connected or not, the ID. It's important to notice that the ID is not a unique identifier. It's the information about the brand and model of the game controller. In this case, you can see that it's just a generic USB Gamepad. index is the actual unique identifier given by the browser. So this is the one that we're using, is the one we want. Then we have mapping, that in the Gamepad API, in the definition, there's a schema of a controller, and the browser tries to match the gamepad that you connect to the browser tries to match it to that schema. If it's able to match it and to map it, then the value will be standard. If it's not able to map it, then it's going to be an empty string. In this case, it was not able to map it, and it's probably because one, my controller is a knockoff, it's not an original one, and also because it doesn't have 17 buttons, it's just a 10 button controller. Then we have timestamp, that is the timestamp of the moment of the last time that an action was performed with the gamepad, and the vibration actuator, that can be used to send like pulses so the controller vibrates if it has that option. Okay, let's remove that and click this. And now the Gamepad API only has these two events, which means that in order to know if a button is pressed or not, we need to actually request continuously information about the gamepad and read if the buttons or the joysticks are operated or not. So to do that, we're going to create a new function, and I'm just going to create it the classical way without using arrow notation or anything like that. And we're going to call it when a gamepad is connected. So read values. Okay. And here what we're going to do is that we're going to read the connected gamepads, and that can be done through the navigator and the method get gamepads. So navigator get gamepads is going to return a list of all the gamepads connected to that browser. But we don't want all the gamepads. We want the ones that we're handling here. So what we're going to do is we're going to get the indexes by using the object keys of the gamepads that we just created here, and where we are assigning the index. And what we do now, and ignore the console and all the errors, is that we are going to traverse the list of, or the array of connected gamepads for let x equals 0 until, well, actually not the gamepad, the index list is what we want. Because we are only interested in the gamepads that we're handling. So we would say, hey, we want to read the buttons of the connected gamepads with the index that we want. Okay, and we want to read the buttons. And the next thing that we need to do is we want to read the buttons. So we need to, the buttons is an array in itself of buttons. So we need to traverse that array too. So let's do that too. For y equals to 0 until the amount of buttons. Oh, this shouldn't be an x, this should be a y. Otherwise, it's going to be a fun one. So you see, we're going to console log. Actually, let's not console log. Let's create a new function that is button pressed, that we're going to call every time that a button is pressed. And then here we're going to say, hey, button of index is pressed. Okay, so what we do now is we go through the gamepads, we go through all the buttons, and now what we do is if the button is pressed, then we call our function button pressed with the value y. So now, for example, if I connect my controller, you see button 2 is pressed, but I keep pressing and nothing happens. Why is that? That's because, as I mentioned before, we need to be reading continuously the values, because the browser is not triggering any event or anything when we press a button. So what we need to do is read values continuously. For that, what we're going to do is uh, if there's gamepads connected, then we're going to use the window request animation frame of, and we're going to call the function values, read values. We use request animation frame because we could use also set timeout or set interval, but the problem with those functions is that they may not be as accurate, and they may cause lag, and that's terrible when gaming. Request animation frame is a function that is called every time that the screen is refreshed. So for example, if you have a monitor that is 60 hertz, that means that the screen refreshes 60 times per second. So every time right before the screen is refreshed, the request animation frame is called. So by doing that, we make sure that we are going to operate and make the operations and read the values right before we refresh the screen. So there's not going to be a lag for the player and for the user. So now that we have that, we connect the gamepad, and when we click, you can see now there's a problem. We can see the button 2 is pressed, button 1 is pressed, but we don't see it once, we see it several times. And this is because it doesn't matter how fast I press the button and then release it. It's more than the 16 or 17 milliseconds that is the time of a request animation frame in a 60 hertz screen, let's say that way. So what we want to do is that we want to keep track of which buttons are pressed. Let's see, active buttons, let's call it that way. And what we're going to do is that if a button is pressed and if it's not active, so let's see if active is not active, then we press it and we mark it as active. Actually, active buttons, the Y equals true, the same way that we were doing with the gamepads. And if the button is not pressed, then we delete it from the list of active buttons. Delete active buttons of Y. So now, this way, what we're going to do is that it doesn't matter how long we're pressing the button, we're only going to hit it once. So I'm going to clear this. I click here and you see button to press, button 1. It doesn't matter if I press it really fast or if I keep it pressed for a while. And now is when we're going to change the controller, and we are going to try a different controller. Let's see. So let me come back here to the beginning and let me put what I had initially, console log e.gamepad. Okay, so you see I have connected a different controller, and you can see in the ID that is the information about the vendor and the model, that it's a Harmonix drum kit for PlayStation 3. So I have connected the original drum kit for Rock Band to my computer, and the navigator, the browser, is detecting it correctly. And I have here the drumsticks. So let me delete the console log, we don't need it anymore, and clear. So if I hit the different values, you can see I'm hitting the drums with the drumsticks and I'm getting reads. That's great. So the drumstick is red, yellow, blue, green, but if I hit them in that order, red, yellow, blue, and green, you see they are not 0, 1, 2, 3, they're 2, 3, 0, 1. This is because, I mean, it's not a standard mapping controller. That's a problem. And we need to take that into account when we develop the game. Ideally, we should create a mapping function, and we may do that in a future video, not now, for just for time's sake. So what we're going to do is that we're going to develop this basic version of the game, just taking into account this order. So for us, 0 will be blue, 1 will be green, 2 red, and 3 yellow. With that in mind, let's go back to the code. So with this, the funny thing with these 30-40 lines of JavaScript, we are already reading that the drum kit is connected, and we detect every time that one of the drums is hit. So what is the next thing to do? The next thing is to create the game itself. Like, this is a little bit, this what we've done so far is to handle the controller. So now we can focus on the game logic, on the game engine. So for that, what we're going to do is that, and I understand that I'm using global variables and may not be the best thing, but this is just a demo. So what we're going to do is that we're going to generate a random value. Okay, so let's see the active, that by default, let's put it like that. And what we're going to do is that we are going to generate a random value from 0 to 3, both included, that is going to represent the drum that needs to be hit next. So for that, we're going to create a function that is generate random active. Okay, that what it's going to do is that initially it's only going to set a random value math.random times 4. Okay, and to show the value, now we're going to do a little bit of HTML. So we're going to say, hey, the active drum is div id active. What we're going to do is that we're going to display that value. Selector active, and we're going to say, hey, the text content is going to be my active value. And I'm going to close the console. We don't need it for now, or we don't need it anymore. So you see, what we need to do is we call this function at the beginning of the game and right before read values. So you see now, oh, there's an error. Oh, assign, yes, let, because active is going to change. So you see, the first value is 1, and if I refresh the page, I get 2, and I get 0. So it's generating randomly. So what we want to do now is, when we hit the right drum, we want to generate a new one. So for that, what we will say is, here in the button press function, we will say, hey, if the index of the button press is the same as the active, then generate a new random active. As simple as that. So you see, for example, right now the active is 2, and as we were saying before, 0 is blue, green is 1, red is 2. So I'm going to hit the red drum. Yeah, and it changed to 1, that is green. So we hit green, and now blue, green again, and now 3 is yellow. So instead of hitting the yellow, I'm going to hit the blue, and you see it doesn't change. The active only changes when we hit the actual drum. So yellow changes. So with this, we have like a little bit of the logic for the game set up. Again, this is going to be a basic version of the game. So the next thing would be keeping track of points. For example, we want to know how many times we have hit the right drum. So let's see, points, div id points here. We're going to display the value. So the idea is, when you hit the right drum, then we say, hey, let's have some points here, start with 0, and every time you hit the right drum, we do points plus plus. We add 1 point. And this may not be the best option, so let's rename this. So this would be generate new round. It's going to be a better description of what this function does, because what we're going to do is that every round we're going to not only we're going to generate a random one, but we're also going to update the value of the points. So the points, we do the same thing. The text content is going to be our points variable. So you see we start 0, and when I hit the blue, oh, there's an error here. Generate, generate, am I using that function somewhere? Generate, oh, random active, yes, I forgot that we call it here too. That's good. So now 0, I hit the blue one, green one, and you see if I hit the wrong one, nothing happens until I hit the right one, and then it goes up. So another good thing to keep track, maybe the streak of, or the combos, if you want to say, the number of times in a row that you have hit the right drum. So let's say, hey, the streak is div at a streak, and what we're going to do is another variable here, streak equals 0 by default. Every round we're going to upgrade the streak the same way that we do with the points and with the active streak. And what we're going to do is, if the drum that we hit is the right one, we say streak plus plus, and if it's not, then what we need to do is the streak goes back to 0. And as this changes here and we don't click generate random, we don't generate a new round, we may want to also call that function here at the bottom of this thing. So now you can see the active is 1, so I hit 1, the points and the streak go up, 3 points and streak go up. Now I fail, and my streak goes back to 0, but if I hit it correctly again, the streak goes up. So with this, we already have a game that handles the drum kit, the controller in itself. It tracks the points, it tracks the streak. One thing that we can do to make the game a little bit more interesting is the points, instead of going one by one, what we can do is give a booster. So if you get one right, or you get 1 point, but if you get 5 right, you get 5 points. So for that, let's create a little bit booster here, and we're going to say, hey, let's give a point for each value of the streak up to 5. So what we're going to do is points, let's see here, let points to add. We don't need this actually. Yeah, let's do it actually. It's going to be the minimum between the streak and 5. And then the points are going to be the current points plus the points to add. And then what we need to do is we need to show the booster too. So let's put it here instead of streak. This is going to be booster, and this is going to be the points to add. And now you see this should generate again. Oh, this doesn't generate at the beginning, so that may be a problem, but not a big deal. So we can put it to 0 to begin with. Not a big deal. And what we do now is we hit a value, it's 1, so it's green. You can see the point to add is going to be 1. Now 0, the point to add is 2. Then let's hit the right for 5 times. 0, 2 is red, 0 again, and you see now it's adding 5 by 5. It doesn't go over 5, the booster. And if I fail, it should go to 0 again. It didn't update immediately, but if I could do that by doing this here. Let's move this outside of here. Let's say it's 0. And then what we can do is that the points to add, instead of updating it there, we updated it here. So now, hopefully, it will update correctly. 2, 2, 1, and now I fail, and it automatically goes down, the booster. Perfect. So now we have the controller, we have the points, we have the booster, we have everything. The main issue is that this is not intuitive. This looks weird, or this is not really a game. So we're going to make it look a little bit like the real game. And to do that, we're going to start by adding a drum set that looks like the actual drum set from Rock Band or Guitar Hero. So that is a drum set has the 4 colors: red, yellow, blue, and green. And let's say class drums. Well, we know that the red is 2, so we're going to do them in the order of my controller. We are not going to add a mapping function for now. Again, we will do that in a future video. And now we're going to jump. We are going to close JavaScript, and we're going to focus on HTML and CSS, because what we're going to do is try to make things pretty. So let's start by saying, hey, the drums, we're going to put them at the bottom of the screen. So bottom of the screen, and they're going to be, let's say, with 100%. Okay, actually let's put it a little bit up. And the drum kit, every drum is going to be like 20 vmin and height, 20 vmin, background, CCC, so we can see them. Oh, 20. So we are using vmin that are relative units, and that will help in a second. We are going to see it with responsiveness, because if the screen is larger, the drums will look bigger. If the screen is smaller, they will look small. So they will always fit the screen correctly. So let's make them like the drum kits. So 50%. And display inline block. And now what we need to do is center them on the screen. Text align center. Okay, and let's add a small border to them, so we can differentiate them a little bit better. So box sizing, border box, we don't really need this, but we're just making it prettier. Let's say 1 vmin solid 333. It's a darker gray. This is starting to look like that. What we need to do now is each drum, we're going to add a box shadow of the color of the drum. So it's going to be an inset shadow of 1 vmin, 0, 0, 0, 1 vmin. Red is number 2. Let's make it a little bit bigger. That may be too big, but it's okay. Then drum number 3 is yellow, so we're going to make it yellow. Then in my drum set, the next one is blue, so let's make it blue. And the last one is 1, it's going to be green. And just to make it match the layout of the game controller in itself, what we're going to do is that we're going to make the yellow and the blue stand up a little bit. So position relative, and here I think I can say drum 3, the yellow, top -4 you mean. Let's make it a little bit more, 5. And we're going to do the same thing with the blue one. So now our drums look a little bit more like the real one. But we still have a problem. The active one is number 3, that is yellow, but that doesn't tell me anything. So what we want to do is we want to highlight the drum when it needs to be hit. For doing that, instead of using this active, what we're going to do is that every time that we updated the active, what we're going to do is for the drums, we're going to add a class that is going to be a drum dash and the number that we need to hit that is active. And then in CSS, what we're going to say is like, oh, what happened? Oh, yeah, that's not going to work. So let me do this here. Let's say active drum, and that one. Perfect. So now in CSS, what we do is like we say, hey, when the active drum is 1, the drum one, let's make it have a background. Let's start with 2, the red one. Let's go from left to right. When the active one is the red one, then the background is going to be like a semi-transparent red. To do that, we do something like this. Then we do the same thing with the yellow, F, and then we go to the blue, and finally the green. So you can see the active one is already green. This is a more visual way of displaying it. So when I hit the green, still the green, but you see it changes to the blue eventually. It's a random thing. Then yellow, yellow again, red. So now, instead of, we don't need this active message anymore, we are not using it, because we can see which drum needs to be hit because it highlights. That's what we wanted. Now what we can do is that the points and the streak, the booster, they all look kind of, you know, they're just text and they're Times New Roman, so that doesn't help much. So what we're going to do is that we're going to go to Google Fonts, and we're going to get like a rocking font. Let's say rock, and here you see New Rocker. It's like a rock and roll type of font. So we're going to embed it in our project for now. Let me close this. So I come here and I'm going to add it here. And I'm going to go to the styles and say, hey, HTML and body, you're going to use font family New Rocker. And I'm going to put a sans serif actually as a fallback. But we know that it's going to work because we're importing it. So now this looks nicer, but let's move it around. So let's do it like the real video game where we have the points on the top right. We get the information about the streak in the center, and the booster is displayed right underneath the points. So let's do that. So first of all, we're going to set the points position absolute in the top right. Instead of being that small, we're going to make it look a lot bigger. So font size, let's say 11 min. Still a little bit little, so let's make it 920. That looks big, that's fine. And another thing that we're going to do is we're going to make it white, and we're going to add a black border around it. There's different ways of doing it. I'm going to use the classic way, that is using the text shadow and adding shadows in every direction. I'm doing it this way. I'm doing this actually because of the next step. In the next step of the game, we're going to add a background, and the problem is that we don't know if the background is going to be accessible enough, or it's going to have enough contrast with black or with white to show the numbers. So what we do is that we add this border around it, so we know that there's going to be contrast always. So let's do this. It's a little bit of a pain, but it takes a second, and it's not that bad. Here it is. So you see now this has a nice border around it. And we're going to do the same thing for the streak. And the streak, what we're going to do is that instead of going here, it needs to go in the center. So what we're going to do is the streak, instead of going, it's going to go to the top 50%. No, top 50% is too high. Let's say 30, we mean. And left 50%, so it's in the center of the screen. And now what we need to do is transform, translate, minus 50%, minus 50%, so it's actually center. Oh wow, that was unexpected. So we can remove the points, we can remove the streak, and display inline block. Oh, that's interesting. I probably did something wrong here because it shouldn't be coming here, it should be staying around here. I'm surprised that it does that. So let's see, inspect this a little bit. Streak. Oh, this display inline block. Did we put position absolute? Yes. Oh, because we have a right 5. So instead of doing this, we're going to write 5. That was the problem. And instead of this, what we need to do is minus 50%. And now it should center within the screen. It's not. Oh, because I forgot to remove this. But perfect, and we don't need this. Good. So you see, this is debugging life. And let's make the font family a little bit smaller. 12, we mean. Font size, sorry, not the font family. That may be too little, so let's make 15. Also, another thing is that this is not telling me what it is anymore. So we may want to come to the JavaScript and say, hey, the streak, instead of just putting that, what we're going to do is we're going to say streak, and then we put the value. And you see now we have another problem, that is that it's not center, so we're going to say text align center, and we need to make it a little bit smaller. Yes, like that. Perfect. See, and it's responsive, as I was mentioning before. This not so great. So instead of this, let's make it 30%. Can we do that? We didn't set up a height, but that's fine. So now it's always there. Perfect. More center. Now we need to move the booster again. So for the booster, we're going to do something similar to the streak and the points, and we're going to delete this, and we're going to say, hey, the booster here is going to follow the same thing, but it's going to be considerably smaller. Let's say 10 vmin, and the top is going to be, instead of 5, it's going to be 20, maybe a little bit more, 23, a little bit more, 25. That may be too much already. And one last thing that we're going to do that still looks too big is that we're going to change the value. So here the points to add, that's the booster. So we're going to say times the points to add, and by default, instead of being 0 that we had before, we're going to have a times 1. So you see now, what we have now is a game that when we connect the thing, we hit red, and we lost the streak. That's because we're doing it here too. We need to copy this from here to here too. So now it's blue, green, blue, blue, green, and you can see how it goes up if I mess up, and they don't always, the streak and the booster not always match, and we can see it when we hit 5 or more. You see? So now one thing is that we have the game and it's working, but you can see that it's all white and a little bit boring. So what we can do is that we can go to YouTube to make it better. And what we're going to search is for a music. So let's go to music. Oh, probably not the best option. So let's go to, I like Paramore. So let's go to Paramore and let's go to Mystery Business here. So what we're going to do is that I'm going to mute that. I don't want to have copyright problems. So what we're going to do is that we can share and we can embed the video in our game. So we copy the code for it, and we are going to uncheck the show player controls. We don't want that. Okay. Now we come back to our game, and in the HTML, what we can do is, on top of everything, we can say, hey, div id video, and we add the iframe. And we're going to change it a little bit, you see, because right now it's coming here, the video. So first change is we're going to make it 100% of the container. And now in CSS, what we're going to do is that we're going to say, hey, the video is going to be position absolute, top 0, left 0, and it's going to have the whole width and the whole height of the game. And we have it here. We can click play, and I'm going to mute these two. So now you see the game looks more like the real game. We have music playing, we have a video playing in the background, and we can hit the drums. So the next thing is that we're going to do is change a little bit the video, and it's the same way that we have control 0. One problem was that we had to click play to get the video playing. We can avoid that by changing autoplay here and adding autoplay equals to 1. Now the video will start automatically and we can play directly with our game. Another thing that you can do is, instead of using a video, you could use a playlist, and then it's going to be one video playing after the other and after the other. It's going to make it easier and nicer to just play. And this is the game that we were going to develop. This, as you can see, we have a video with music. We have the drums that they update every time that we hit the right one. And this, again, is a really basic video and a really basic video game. My kids love it because they cannot play the real video game, but they can play this one. And the good thing is that it can be easily extended. I'm going to pause the video. It can be easily extended in many ways, because what we can do is, instead of waiting for the player to hit the right one, as we're doing right now, we can have it so the right one changes every few seconds. So it looks more like the real video game. Or we can take it one step beyond, and what we can do is, like the real video game, have the drops, have the notes or the drums that need to be hit falling from the top, dropping from the top, and only hit it when they go through the right button. So things like that is what we can do to make it look more like the real video game. For that, we would need to have like a JSON file. Another thing that we could do to improve this basic version would be, for example, to integrate the YouTube API and detect when the video ends. And when we do that, what we could do is show the stats at the end of each song, which would be like the real game again. Like, oh, you hit this many right, you had your longest streak was this much, this is your points. So yeah, that's the game. It's a simple one, but it's a entertaining one. I hope you like this video, and I look forward to seeing if you develop one and your own version based on this. I look forward to seeing it. Thank you.